It was a late evening in Istanbul, the kind of night when the city is still buzzing but you feel strangely alone in the middle of the crowd. Demet Özdemir had just left the set after a long day of shooting. She was tired, her shoulders heavy with exhaustion, her mind drifting between the role she had just played and the reality she was returning to. She pulled her coat tighter around her body, her breath visible in the cold night air, and started walking toward her car. At first, she didn't notice anything unusual. The traffic sounds, the laughter from a nearby cafe, the footsteps of strangers on the sidewalk, all of it blended into the familiar background noise of the city she knew so well. But then, something changed. A rhythm. A sound that wasn't just random. Footsteps. Slow, steady, and following her pace. Demet froze for a second, her heart skipping a beat. Was it just her imagination? She glanced to her left, then to her right. People were walking, yes, but there was one pair of steps that matched hers perfectly, never too fast, never too slow. Always there, just a few meters behind. She quickened her pace, trying not to look too obvious. The footsteps behind her quickened too. Her pulse raced. Every nerve in her body told her to run, but something held her back. There was no threat in the silence, no malice. It felt different, strangely familiar. The street light above flickered, and in that brief moment of dimness, her mind filled with memories she thought she had buried. She remembered a time when she could feel someone's presence without needing to see them. The way a connection lingers in the air, invisible but undeniable. Demet whispered to herself, "It can't be, not him." But the silence answered her with the same rhythm of footsteps, steady and unshakable. Her palms grew sweaty. She clutched her bag tighter, every sense heightened. And yet, the more she walked, the more she realized she wasn't afraid. This wasn't the kind of silence that screams danger. It was the kind of silence that carries weight, a silence that speaks without words. And in that moment, she knew. Whoever was following her, she was already connected to him. She didn't need to see his face to feel it. Her heart had recognized him long before her eyes would. Demet slowed her breathing and let the city wrap itself around her like a blanket, horns in the distance, a tram bell, a street vendor calling out warm chestnuts. She anchored herself in those small sounds, counting them one by one, but the rhythm behind her kept returning like a pulse she knew by heart. Slow. Certain. Close enough to feel, far enough not to touch. She didn't turn around. Instead, she listened, really listened. The scuff of a boot against old stone. The soft drag of fabric when an arm swings a little wider than most. The almost inaudible click of a keychain against a metal zipper. None of it should have meant anything. To anyone else, it wouldn't. But to her, these were fingerprints in the dark, details her body recognized before her mind dared to catch up. She remembered how he used to match her steps on set when they were late for a scene, never overtaking, never lagging, just there, a half step behind as if he could read the beat she kept in her head. It wasn't a habit, it was a promise. A quiet one. The kind you don't sign, the kind you feel. A wind gust slid down the street and lifted the hair at the nape of her neck. That was when the scent reached her, faint, familiar, impossible to mistake. Not the kind of cologne that announces itself, but the kind that lingers like a memory, cedar, a little smoke, something clean. She closed her eyes for a second she couldn't afford and let it pass through her like a wave. Her chest tightened. She didn't need proof. She already had it. She crossed to the quieter side of the avenue where the shops were shuttered and the glass reflected thin lines of light. In the reflection she could have stolen a glance, but she didn't. Part of her feared what would happen if she confirmed what her body already knew. The other part feared what would happen if she was wrong. Both fears felt like the same fall. She stopped at a corner. The footsteps stopped too. Silence filled the space between them, and in that silence she heard everything, the apology he never made, the questions she never asked, the night they both chose to say nothing because saying something would have broken everything they were trying to protect. The city exhaled. The footsteps resumed, 1, 2, 3, and stopped again. The street settled into a hush that rang louder than any admission. She felt it all, the history, the hesitation, the hope that frightened her most. It filled the space around her like a tide. And then, unable to hold it in, she turned. For a moment the world felt suspended, traffic muted, wind holding its breath, the neon signs around her fading into a blur. And there he was. Can standing just a few steps away, his figure outlined by the pale street light above them. He didn't speak. Not a single word. His chest rose and fell, his hands shoved deep into his pockets as if keeping them there was the only way to stop them from reaching out. His eyes locked on hers, and in that look was everything he had never said, everything he had once tried to bury. Demet's throat tightened. She had imagined this moment countless times. She thought she would lash out, demand answers, maybe even turn away. But standing there, face to face, she found herself stripped of all rehearsed reactions. The silence between them was louder than any confession. His gaze wasn't angry, nor pleading. It was broken. A kind of regret that no apology could clean. She recognized it instantly because she carried the same shadow in her own reflection every morning. That's why she felt it so sharply, because the pain he wore was a mirror of her own. She finally whispered, almost against her will, "Why now?" The words shattered the stillness, fragile yet heavy. He blinked, but still said nothing. His silence wasn't empty, it was full. Full of hesitation, of words unsaid, of choices he wished he could change. And as much as it infuriated her, she understood. Sometimes silence is the answer. Her mind screamed at her to walk away, to protect herself, but her body betrayed her. She stood rooted to the ground, every nerve tuned to him. She realized then that she didn't need him to speak. She already knew. The weight of his silence carried more truth than 1,000 explanations. In that instant, she felt it all, the longing, the regret, the fragile hope that maybe it wasn't over, not entirely. Demet felt her breath catch as the silence between them deepened. Finally, she broke. Her voice was low, almost a whisper, but it cracked the night like thunder. "You think your silence doesn't speak? You're wrong. I hear it. I hear everything you're not saying." Her words hung there, trembling in the air, and she watched him flinch as if she had struck him. His lips parted slightly, but still no sound came. Instead, he lowered his gaze, shoulders heavy with a guilt that no apology could erase. "That night," she continued, her voice firmer now, "I felt you leaving before you even walked away. And tonight, I felt you coming back before you ever showed your face." Ken lifted his head then, his eyes wet, shimmering under the dim glow of the streetlight. For a moment, Demet thought he might finally speak. But he didn't. Instead, he stepped one pace closer, not closing the distance fully, but enough to let her feel the warmth of his presence. A silent confession, a wordless plea. Her hand lifted slightly, instinctively, but she stopped herself halfway. To reach for him meant reopening every wound. To let him stand there meant living with what-ifs forever. It was an impossible choice, and yet she stood frozen, the city spinning around them like they were the only two people left alive. In that fragile space, Demet finally admitted to herself, she was still tied to him. Not by promises, not by words, but by something stronger, the silence that held their entire story. Demet inhaled deeply, her chest rising as if she were about to dive underwater. The silence had already said what words never could, but she knew she couldn't leave it unfinished, not again. "You followed me in silence," she said, her voice trembling but steady enough to slice through the night. "And I felt every single step. Do you understand? I felt you behind me like I've felt you inside me all these years. You didn't need to say my name, I heard it anyway." Her words poured out now, unstoppable, raw. "You think silence protects you, but it doesn't. It hurts. It leaves holes that never close. And yet, it's also the only language we've ever really shared." That silence carried everything, the love, the pain, the goodbyes we never said. And tonight, I finally understood, it wasn't just me who carried it. You did too. She stepped forward, erasing half the distance between them. You didn't speak, she whispered, but you confessed more than you ever realized. You told me you're still here. You told me you never stopped. And I can't pretend I didn't feel it. Tears finally spilled down her cheeks. For once, she didn't wipe them away. She let them fall, each one a piece of the story she had buried. I loved you then. I love you now. Even in your silence, I still hear you. And that's what I can't escape. For the first time, Can moved closer, just one step, but it was enough to close the chasm that had stretched between them for years. His eyes glistened, and though no sound left his lips, his silence roared louder than anything else. Demet exhaled shakily, a mix of relief and sorrow in her breath. She had said it all. She had given the truth its voice. And whatever happened next, whether he spoke or stayed forever silent, she knew one thing, she would never again mistake his silence for absence. Because silence, with him, was never empty. It was full. Full of everything they were, everything they had lost, and everything that might still remain. As the city lights flickered around them, Demet turned slightly toward the darkness ahead. She had told all, laid her soul bare. And in that silence, heavy yet tender, she finally understood the truth. Sometimes words are not needed, because love, real love, speaks in ways that can never be silenced.